Okay, so I've just finished watching episode 3. So, obviously, from the previous episode, we found out half of the votes from the round table. So, here's the other half of the votes. As you can see, majority of people decided to vote for Nico. So, he obviously revealed he was a faithful, and Stephen said that, maybe we should listen to what Nico said, that it was potentially a setup. And Kate was having a chat with Lucy, and she said to Lucy, what, I don't know why everyone's turned against me. Mark said that Tamika's energy seemed to have changed, and she was having this chat. He was having this chat with Kate and Alan. Alan obviously being the traitor, or one of the traitors even. I think this is where Ruth had obviously hinted about the two older allies conversation that she had with Jonathan at the start as well. Because apparently that was the conversation that Nico was in the car with Ruth, Jonathan, and Claire, and Jonathan was like, if you don't know anyone here, at least you've got allies. At least you've got some allies here. And then, in terms of the traitors, they had a little chat to work out, the first person they were going to murder. And they said Tom would be a good idea because he's quite smart. Claire would be blamed. Well, if Claire was to have got murdered, it would be blamed on Kate. Or Kat suggested they could go for someone completely random like Joe W, and just completely change up the whole game. So, Ruth basically explained that whole Jonathan alliance with Claire almost felt like Nico got stabbed in the back, and then we found out at breakfast time that it was Tom that got murdered. Claire was obviously shocked. Stephen said he was obviously seen as a threat or as a strong player. And the mission basically said a charged or a charger. Wait, let me see what it says. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So that was the title of the mission. So, we're obviously with 2 people down now. No Paloma and no Tom. 3 people down and no Nico. Jonathan was talking to Joe M, saying that 2 of the names that Tom had mentioned for potential traitors were Kate and Claire. So, trying to deflect the blame off of himself by obviously putting forward the names of people that, now can't speak for themselves because they're out of the game. And then Ruth was discussing with Claire about that whole alliance with Nico. And, maybe it was just gameplay for Jonathan at that point. And actually he did just want to be a traitor. And Kate had a thought that, one of the legends had become one of the traitors. So, the Alan Carr, the Jonathan Ross, the Stephen Fries of the group. So, that was quite an interesting jab from her that, they're going to have potentially somebody young. They're going to have potentially somebody that's a legend, and then another who, will just help the triple traitor threat. So in terms of the mission, so the next mission was, they were all chained up. So I think there were 16 of them left. And for every person they release, they get £500 for that. So I think a total of 8,000 if they were to get everyone released. And they're basically all standing in Claudia's cabin, and there were so many keys in that room and then so many keys outside. So there was loads of little mini games, and eventually you had more and more people helping out. So the first 4 that were released were Stephen, Kat, Mark, and Nick. There was 4 keys inside the cabin. They then, had to do a water little mini game to get more keys to then win other people out, and eventually everyone was released, so they got the 8,000, and then they were obviously all running around trying to find shields, and in the end I think it was Claire and it was Mark who both got the shield. So Nick basically questioned whether Claire's going to be bolder at the round table, because now she's got the shield, and now she's not going to be murdered, she can only be banished. Is she going to speak up and be more confident? Tamika said that for her, it's hard for her to see something and just kind of look around and forget about it. So she still thinks that Mark's a traitor. Celia, obviously, and her snooping around. Jonathan, Joe and Joe were both speaking. So Joe W and Joe M. So Joe M's the boxer. Joe W's the, I think, actor and comedian. So Joe W said potentially it's Jonathan. Joe M said it was potentially Stephen. He said Stephen got it wrong, so I got it wrong. And Joe W said potentially they've picked someone to lead the traitors and someone to lead the faithfuls, because that would be quite an important battle, I guess, between, traitor Jonathan Ross and faithful Stephen Fry. So at the round table, they currently had £27,500. Ruth explained straight away that she needed to be more forward. She said, we can't all be sitting here with our theories. We will have to just come forward and be brave. And to be honest, I actually before the Traitors, I didn't even know who she was. I like, I don't know what she's been in, what she's done, but she's very vocal. She's obviously gone through a lot in life. She's only got one leg, so she's had some sort of incident with that. But even she, just very brave straight away. Like, she might have gone in there thinking, people actually are not, maybe not going to know who I am, or going to know me less than, say, Alan Carr, who's basically everywhere. But yeah, she basically came forward and said, we need to all just be, being forward with our theories. We can't just keep those things to ourselves. Celia said to everyone that she was doing her snooping around, seeing who talks to who and who actually doesn't talk to who. And she pointed out Charlotte and Kat as two people that she doesn't think actually talk to each other. Tamika explained that she thinks Mark is a traitor, and, the traitors know who's not going to be coming through the door. So Mark basically defended himself and said, well, actually, I was looking for those big reactions because maybe the traitors are overdoing it by going, oh, I can't believe they didn't come back, but they're the ones that knew that person wasn't going to come back, kind of thing. So that was the theory with that, seeing how over dramatic or under dramatic people's reactions were. Nick also then said that he noticed the change in Tamika's behaviour, and she literally replied back and said, that is just my character, this is just who I am. Joe M brought his theory. Well, Joe M, Joe W both had the theory, but yeah, it was Joe M that basically said it's almost like there's two big dogs going ahead against each other, so Stephen and Jonathan, but not really sure which one is leading which team. Ruth then brought up her theory with Jonathan Ross about his promised alliance with Claire and Nico, and it almost felt like that he'd kind of gone back on himself and kind of, stabbed Nico in the back with that. And yeah, Jonathan basically replied back and said he was almost just, when he hears that people have thoughts about other people, when they have ideas that someone might be a traitor, he goes to those people individually, testing the theories with those people to see what their reactions are as well. So he doesn't really remember the whole alliance conversation. It was before the Traitors and Faithfuls even got picked, but he doesn't remember it. But, Lucy and Claire both remember that. So, Ruth and Claire both remember that. So is there now going to be a target on both of their backs? Who knows? So when it came down to the votes, you can see here you had a Kate, a David, a Stephen, Charlotte, Jonathan, Ruth, Tamika, Alan, Stephen, Tamika. And then you basically had, majority of these were votes for Tamika. So in the end, it was Tamika that was banished from the round table. Ruth basically said to Nick that she feels like now a massive target's been put on her back because of the whole Jonathan situation. But Ruth does have Claire there to back her, but Claire is also kind of in a bit of deep heat and, fire herself. So, if Ruth loses Claire, Ruth's basically on her own. And then Alan and Kat were having a quick chat, because Jonathan was close to being out of the game. Alan said, would you have thrown Jonathan under the bus? And she went, well, in that situation, I probably would have. Probably wouldn't have felt like I wanted to, but would have been able to do that. So it's almost like Alan and Kat are close together. They know Jonathan's had a bit of heat on him, so they're not scared to get rid of him. And then when it came to the traitors having their discussion, Kat said, it'd be wrong to get rid of Ruth, with Jonathan saying, well, actually, I think it's a good idea to get rid of Ruth because she's kind of, I'm like her biggest target. But then also it's bad to get rid of Ruth because then they'll go, well, hang on, who didn't like her the most? Okay, well, she was really going for Jonathan. Jonathan's the traitor. So there's kind of a good and bad for them to pick her and for them not to pick her. So yeah, she was 50-50. And they said potentially somebody like Charlotte, because Alan said she always keeps guessing wrong. So, she went for Tamika, it wasn't Tamika. She went for Nico, it wasn't Nico. And then potentially somebody smart like David, someone completely random, someone who's just kind of floating through, who is genuinely really smart, picking up on all these, types of body language or what people are saying or what people are not saying or, what theories are coming out. So they basically in the end decided it was going to be Ruth, David or Charlotte. And at the end of episode 3, that's kind of all we found out. So yeah, it's getting really juicy and it's getting really quick. I think we lost 3 people in this episode. We lost Tom, we lost Nico, we lost Tom and we lost Tamika. And obviously for episode 4, we're going to be losing someone obviously at night time, probably a banishment and probably another murder as well, so at least 2 or 3 people. But yeah, it's getting really, really interesting now. So yeah, we've lost 4 people from the game, so we're going to see who our 5th person is tomorrow. But yeah, I think everyone's playing a really, really good game. I think even some of the quieter characters like Lucy, like Mark, they are starting to come out of their shells a little bit more. Like Joe M, the fact that he brought that whole the Battle of the Legends and stuff to the table, at least he's being vocal. People like Celia, she's not really talking as much, but when she does, it's funny. She had a little fart in the cabin. So, there's moments that these people are bringing to the show. So, yeah, that's it for now. And until my next review, I will be back very, very soon.